Welcome to the video today. We're going to look at how you can easily and quickly create a new chord progression from scratch inside of Rapid Composer using the palette tab in their chord selector. To get to the chord selector, you would select a chord and you would see the palette button right here. Now obviously there are many other ways to create chord progressions, plus you've always got tons of chord progressions in all of these folders with just endless different ideas for kinds of chord progressions. But today we're going to do it from scratch, so let's do that. Let's select that, go to the palette tab, and depending if you've been in here before or not, you may start off on this tab or a different tab. But generally there are three tabs. For the master track, which means you will pick chords which will then go straight to the master track. For chord progressions, where you can create unique chord progressions and save them as a full progression using this button here. And if you just want to preview chords, you can use this tab here. Today we're using for chord progression. And we're going to drag it out. And sometimes if you want to drag this out, just go to a different tab until you get this little drag out helper there. But I find the best view is in the palette view, and you can get that little, and if you don't get that little marker, just go back to a different tab and that little marker to pull it out and drag it will show up. So it's great because you can make it huge because there's so many choices we can have inside this program. So that's how you get to it. Now exactly what is it? Well, it took me a little bit to figure this out. I tried to find it in the manual, but it does make sense, so I was able to, I believe, at least figure part of this out. And it's turns out it is better than I thought. So before we start with what we have here, you can set it up using this button here in any way you want. So you can have no colors to help you. If you know all your rules of harmony and you know your music really well, you can do it by consonants, meaning green for go and yellow and red for dissonant. Pretty straightforward. Tonality, major, minor, diminished, augmented, suspended, all different color codes there. And you can go, this is my favorite, close to tonal center, farther, or very far, simple, green, yellow, red. Common notes includes current notes of the chord, some notes and no notes, another great way to pick your chords. And chord suggestions, which is pretty obvious. Not suggested, and green strong is suggested. So that's your options for visualizing these chords with colors. You also have a bunch of options. Right now I have it set up so that if I play a chord, it simply plays the piano from within the application. But it plays a piano chord. But you can set it up so that you can have your favorite instruments play the chord. If you have a nice string library or guitar library, just connect them up to separate tracks. And if you have this selected here, it says preview with the chord and bass note, preview using the phrase in the phrase editor, selected phrase in the composition, and using the phrase browser selection. But up here is where you pick what instrument, if you're using the internal or using the active track instrument. And that's what I meant by setting up your tracks to have your favorite instruments play your chords. So you can do that, and then you can have it play a chord base, or a phrase in the phrase editor, or you could just drag out a small little phrase and have it play that, or just a chord. So my point here is you can set this up any way you want, because some people like to create the chord progressions for, say, strings using a string sound, a string instrument. And other people like to use piano. Piano works pretty good. That's what I'm using today. But these options give you everything you need to set it up the way you want. So let's go back to color by distance, tonal center. Now let's discuss what we have here. So what we're dealing with is you pick your chord or your scale and type of scale. So in this case it's a C major, but we could pick anything we want. And you can see here that it's basically the scale. So indeed, if you wanted to just create a progression that is a C major scale, you would go up here to this plus button, and I hit that a little too hard, but you would go to where the plus is highlighted and it says click to insert chord, or right click to insert multiple chords. So I'm going to right click, and now I'm just going to pick the chords of the scale. And then this button here will grab them all, and you can tell it if you want it in the Roman or the letters. And then you can just select it, drag it to your chord master track, and now we have the scale right there. So that's how the mechanics of creating different chord sets, progressions, dragging them into either your DAW or the master track or one of your tracks. Let's see if we can drag it into one of our tracks. And no, I guess you can't. So in that case, I'll just move this to the side and show you how you could get that and save it internally. So here we dragged it to the master track. So we could just say then that, well, let's just populate it with those chords. So we hold down Shift H, and there we have our scale in triads. Then you can select that. You can right click and you could say save selected phrase to whatever folder, and my folder's down here is in saved folder, and it would just appear here. So you can name it whatever you want and put it in whatever folder, and just once you write the group or tell it which group and then give it a name, then hit save selected phrase. So that's how you can create them, populate your master track, and get them inside a track also. So we'll just delete that. We'll go back to our selector, and I just moved it over, and we're ready to start going to the next level here, describing what this is. So we know that these notes are the scale, but what else do we have here? Well, since we picked C major, these are all actively something that would work with if you're going to create a chord progression in a C major idea. So let's try that out. So we go with a C, and we know it's showing these are all green, so it's a sure bet that it'll sound good. And then we could go with something a little edgier, but it's still going to work. And then back to maybe an F, and then A minor, and back to the root there. Yeah. So then we can start to get a little bit more exciting, and we can take some more chances. We could go that sounds good. So we could start building our first chord idea. So let's just go select this up here, Shift, select, right click, delete, and now let's create a chord progression, a simple one to start. That sounds good, so let's go up here and right click. And sometimes this, you have to just, it should be recording now. No, I think it has to be highlighted to do it, so Let's right click on there again. See, it stays green. Now it's ready to record. So and back to where we started. And then we can just, it collects them just like that, and then we can just drag it in there, and we have a new chordal idea right there. And since that was more, that's 8 chords, I'd have to drag this out another measure to get that in there too. But I think you get the idea. So again, now let's start to pick up the pace and get a little bit more interesting here, because we can get ideas to borrow chords. And the first thing I would do is give us more chord ideas in the C major, and simply use this button here saying you want more ideas, more choices, and you can go as far right into jazz territory and see how far it'll go. So these are all the possible chord ideas, color-coded in a C major to help you come up with progressions. So let's start, and let's go, we're going to start with a C major 7. And maybe go to, let's listen to that again. You can just click on them. We may want to change that. And we may not want to go with that sustained or suspended. So you can just try all kinds of different ideas. And you may like that, and then you can save that and drag it in and save it. So that is how that works, where you can extend and get into jazz territory. But here's where it gets a little more interesting. Let's make this a little less so we don't get confused here. And let's just go to the very basic C major. And let's say, well, what if we want to be able to pick in a C major 3 or 4 chords, 2, 3, 4 chords, and then borrow something from some other scale, whatever we want. So let's delete that up here. Right click, delete, and let's see if we can do that. So we're in C major here, but we want to first turn this on so we have 2 other scales we can start to pull from. Let's try 1. So we turn this on, and again, we can choose whatever we want it to be. In this case, I have it to a D minor. And here's the interesting bit. So it added some chords that are relevant to the D minor. If you click on it, it says scale is D minor. Click on the root note or scale name to set them. But if we click on here, highlight reference scale number 2 notes and chords. So these are the notes and chords for the second scale, which is D minor. And these are all chords that would work in a D minor. So look at this. So we can go back to the C major, and it's all blue because these are all relevant to C major. And whenever, so we could pick a couple chords, say we could go with a C, the F, and maybe the A minor, and then we can say, well, now I want to borrow something from a D minor, turn that on so we can see them, and these should be a fairly good bet. And then back to the C. So let's just listen to that. So there we just borrowed from a D minor, and it was still worked as far as a chord progression idea. Let's try it again. So this time, let's go to something like, say, an F major to maybe a G minor, and we can turn that idea on and off. And we could also have another reference here back to the C major. This can be anything, and we can turn those on or off to see what those are whenever we want. So we got that ability. But again, so let's just turn this off for now. We're going to start off in the F major. And so we could go, again, this would be the scale of F major. But we want to get fancier than that, so delete that. And so we could start with maybe the A, go to the C, and now I want to pull and borrow a chord from a G minor. So we can take a look at what would, the ones that turn blue, those are in the G minor, which would pertain to our setup. So, and then we go back. We just stole the chord idea from there. We can go back to the F major, or you can turn that off completely. And then we can finish off our musical idea. Let's see how that worked. I think after the board chord, we don't want something so radical there. So I'm going to change that to maybe, let's see, something that might work better. All right. And that's another chord, a nice chord progression. So you kind of see how that works, and I'm just having a great time with using this interface. And once you get the hang of it, you can literally just, it's so musical that it really just gives you great ideas. So if you want to just create in the F major and you want to just pull from whatever, this is a really neat way to do it. So, and there are certain scales that, and like if you wanted to go in with more with the rules of harmony, you might start with a C major and pull from a C minor, right? So now we can turn that off and only turn it on when we need it. So we know these are all blue. These are all pertaining to the C major. So you can just start creating chords. There's a nice one right there. Now we can take it a little further. We can start with a C major 7. But I usually like to start with maybe a C, couple chords from the C, and then let's turn this on and we can pull from the minor. So let's just see if we can get a good progression first try. So again, we want C major, and we'll just turn those on and off, clear that out. And now we're going to pull from the minor. And then back to the C should work. All right, so C. And I probably changed that to maybe in fact, I'd probably go there. So now that's sounding pretty good. Let's go. So, yeah, I mean, I've been able to come up with unique chord progressions faster using this system than any other interface so far. And I'm sure there's more to learn from this, but I think I'm kind of getting the idea of how this works. If you have a better idea of how this works and can give more information, for sure write down in the comments. As we try to learn all these great tools inside of Rapid Composer. But I really want to share this in more detail because it's really working great for me. You can keep it really simple. You can turn off all the other scales and you can just work in a C major. And if you wanted, you could really just say, well, stay in the scale. Or you can start to expand out and go all the way to borrowed chords and jazz chords. And then you can also experiment with all the different color schemes. So that's the video today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And if you know more about these tabs, these systems for building chords, be sure to write it in the comments. This channel thrives off of the thumbs up, the likes and comments, keeps the channel going. I certainly hope you're able to make music wherever you're at in this world. And we'll see you on the next video.